finally, the Trevor Bauer sweepstakes is all done. He ends up with the boys in blue. Does that officially give the Dodgers that bragging rights for 2 in a row? And do they have the best rotation in the game? Find out in the next episode of Sideline Sports Podcast. Welcome to Sideline Sports Podcast. If you're not on the sideline, it's not Sideline Sports Podcast. And we welcome you all into another edition of Sideline Sports Podcast. I'm the host, Alex Naveca, where if you're not on the sideline, it's not Sideline Sports Podcast, a source of all of your SoCal sports news. And with me today is Vincent Samperio, the creator of Chavez, Ravine Fiend, and the host of Locked On Dodgers. Vincent, how you doing today? And you know what? It's an absolute pleasure to have you on.
I appreciate you having me on. Yeah, I'm doing great. It's, always a great day to be a Dodger fan right now, and always a good time to be talking about the Dodgers. And right now I'm doing both, so it's all good.
And I like you representing the Dodgers, the hat, that new World Series hoodie right there looks pretty good right there. 2020 World Series champs. Before we get into this episode, guys, if you have any questions that you guys have, please comment down below. Also, make sure to hit the subscription button down below so you guys can make sure to stay tuned with all of the upcoming episodes, especially with baseball season coming around. We're going to be having guests like Vincent to be coming onto the show. So without further ado, let's get started. Vincent, I know you're pretty happy about it, but I think you and I have both similar reactions. But what did you think about this Trevor Bauer deal?
Yeah, it was a little bit surprising, even though the Dodgers were one of the finalists named, or they kept being linked to him. You know, we've seen them linked to guys in the past, Garrett Cole, Bryce Harper, Garrett Cole, they were able to go a little bit longer. Bryce Harper was a front-loaded deal, only 4 or 5 years max with a bunch of money up front. We haven't really seen guys take that, and Trevor Bauer's proved to be a little bit different than that. He took the front-loaded deal. His market probably never materialized, so that's why the Dodgers were able to get in on it or later on. And then he had the weird little thing with the Mets gear kind of coming out on his website on the day, and then it ended up, everyone thought it was going to the Mets, and then it ended up being the Dodgers. But yeah, I mean, on the Dodgers on paper just became even better than they already were, and they were probably already the best team in baseball, so now they just add to it.
Definitely. I feel like the Dodgers really wanted to make a move to try to compete with that starting rotation for the San Diego Padres. They were making all of these starting rotation moves with Darvish, Snell, and with Musgrove, completely flipping that rotation and making it one of the top in the games. But the Dodgers, they just wanted to make sure, hey, we're still here. We haven't really been making a lot of moves on our rotation, but you know what? Let's go ahead and get a Trevor Bauer, and let's go ahead and just make sure we seal the deal and let the league know, hey, we're still number one. And you know what? There is no such thing as the hangover on the championship.
Yeah, I think the Padres, obviously, doing the moves that they did, I don't know if it pushed the Dodgers at all. They probably still would have done this deal regardless, but I think the Dodgers as players, they see the Padres getting all the hype, all the attention, and hey, we're the reigning champions, not the Padres. And then they go out and add Bauer, and now a guy with a little bit of flair on the field. That the Dodgers and Padres had a couple little dust ups last year in the playoffs with the Machado and Graterol. So I think it just adds to all that. And I mean, it shifts the power kind of to the National League. I mean, the Braves were 1 game away from the World Series last year, and they got added Charlie Morton, and they brought back Osuna, so they'll be just as good. The Mets have gotten better, the Padres got better, the Dodgers got better. So I think the Arenado went to the Cardinals. So I think the National League's pretty powerful right now, and for the Dodgers to still be on top is kind of crazy.
And of course, I have to bring back some very bad memories for Dodger fans, but the Washington Nationals are a good team as well. They're back to being relevant, really bolstering up that starting rotation. That bullpen looks even better. That lineup looks deadly too. So that NL East is just going to be even more interesting. It's not just going to be the Braves that are going to be a concern, but now you have the Mets. Now you have the Nationals. And you could still make an arguable case with the Philadelphia Phillies. They resigned Didi, resigned Real Muto, and you talked about the Cardinals trade for Arenado. That can be potentially a wild card team, maybe even a division. Maybe they can win the division there. But what I really want to see is I really want to see a rivalry brew up between the Dodgers and the Padres. I mean, we know Dodgers and Giants, but how about Dodgers and Padres? These are two very talented teams that are going to go, and it's going to be a bloodbath throughout this whole entire upcoming season.
Yeah, I mean, we saw it last year where the Padres were on the heels of the Dodgers. I mean, they were only, one game back into September. They had a series with the Dodgers in San Diego. The Padres came back and won the first game with, I think Grisham hit the home run off Kershaw and, did his little twirl, and then that got the Dodgers going. And then after that, the Dodgers just went on a tear the rest of the year into the playoffs, didn't even give up a game to the Padres in the playoffs. And like I mentioned with the Machado Graterol thing. And I think it just kind of, the Dodgers are not that they got complacent, but some of those guys have been around for 5, 6, 7 titles in a row, NOS titles. You need something, and without really a challenger, the Diamondbacks challenged a little bit. The Rockies took into game 163, but then they fell off the next 2 years. So I think having that young, hungry team in the Padres kind of pushing the Dodgers and, big brother, little brother syndrome, whatever you want to call it, I think that rivalry kind of pushed them, and I think it's going to keep pushing them. You mentioned the hangover earlier. I think because of the Padres, the Dodgers won't have that hangover because they want to, keep on top of the division and not let the Padres take over.
Right. It's going to be super fun to see how that young Padres team mixed with some pretty good veterans on that team, see how they mesh. And just because they look good on paper, it doesn't mean chemistry-wise they're not going to have any issues as well. But it's going to be interesting to see how that Dodgers-Padres fans out. And even quite frankly, I'm actually surprised with the news that released that ESPN will be broadcasting that opening day game for the Dodgers on April 1st, and they're going to be at Colorado. I would have liked to see a Dodgers-Padres opening series of the season. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it would have been ideal. The schedule for the season comes out a little bit earlier, so it's kind of hard for them to make a premier matchup early on. But yeah, that would have been an ideal day of whether it's Kershaw, Buehler against Darvish or Snell. I mean, the Dodgers, if they go head-to-head, ace-to-ace, it's going to be a pretty good series with Darvish, Snell, and Musgrove, and Lamet, and then, the Dodgers, Bauer, Buehler, Kershaw, whatever order you want to put them. It would have been an ideal situation, but for the Dodgers to start on the road kind of sucks the year after they won the championship, but like I said, it was predetermined, so it's just that happens sometimes.
So let's make a quick transition. You started talking about it a little bit. With the addition of Trevor Bauer, what do you think will be the starting rotation?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. So with last year being a short season, nobody threw over like 60, 70 innings. And to expect people to go back to throwing 150 plus innings this year is probably a little bit far-fetched. So that's going to benefit the Dodgers. Obviously, they can go, if they really wanted to, they could go 7-man rotation. But I would imagine they're going to go with the 5-man rotation with the swinger, 6th guy who's going to make starts on days when they don't have a lot of days off in a row or wherever else it is. So I think, regardless of the order, I think it's Kershaw, Buehler, Bauer. David Price will have the chance to be in that rotation. He's not going to be a reliever, I don't think. And then I think they got to give Julio Diaz a shot after what he did last year in the playoffs, just, based on he's been around a while. He's earned it. He's earned his stripes, and I think he's ready to go. And then you got Dustin May and Tony Gonsolin, who are just kind of sitting on the outside. Obviously Dustin May stuff probably plays a little bit better in the bullpen, and Gonsolin's a little bit more of a swing guy, kind of like a Ross Stripling was, where he can start, he can relieve, he can long relief, whatever you need out of him. So I'm interested to see what they're going to do. People have also talked about maybe using Julio in a Josh Hader type role where he's throwing a couple innings 2 times a week or so, closing out games and things of that nature. So, yeah, for me, I'd go with the five that I mentioned, and then Gonsolin and May just kind of hang out and fill in where they're needed. But as we've seen in the past, the Dodgers are going to use probably 10, 12 pitchers over the course of a year to make a start, and they're going to have to, it'll just depend on what happens.
I was actually thinking the same thing of that ideal 5-man rotation and really just try to use Gonsolin and May to really toss them around, see where you can use them. Because let's be real, Vincent, there's still a huge hole in that Dodgers bullpen, and that's a closer role. And they showed interest in Brad Hand and Kirby Yates, but still didn't act on it. And I felt as though maybe there was more urgency to sign a closer than signing Trevor Bauer. Trevor Bauer, if you ask me, wasn't something they needed. It was just something they wanted. Now, I feel like a Brad Hand, Kirby Yates was something they needed to replace Kenley Jansen, and then you make Kenley Jansen a guy in middle relief for maybe not a setup man because you got some good weapons to be able to be a setup man, but I don't feel like Jansen can really close games anymore.
Yeah, Kenley Jansen's pretty hard to trust right now, and they're going to give him – he's going to go into the season as the closer, quote unquote. But I think this year is a little bit different where in years past, where this is the last year of Kenley Jansen's contract. So if they do need to make a move from him, he struggles early on and struggles continue, I think very easily they can take him out of the closer role and maybe go to a closer by committee or maybe let Blake Trinan try it out. I don't think Gratterall can probably do it, but he's not missing enough bats yet. He probably still needs a little bit more refinement in terms of his actual pitching repertoire. But I think it's a matter of the regular season and playoffs are different. The Dodgers can get by in the regular season probably without a bona fide closer. And then when it gets to the playoffs, that's when things change. But when it gets to the playoffs, the other thing changes. You don't need 5 starters, as we saw last year's playoffs where Dustin May was opener and reliever. Gonsolin was opener and reliever. And then you had Julio opening and closing games as well. So I think the Dodgers are always building for October to where they know the rotation is going to get shorter. Some of those last rotation guys are going to move to the bullpen. We saw Kenta Maeda do it in the past, and we'll see other guys do it. So I think they're fine in the regular season with their closer, and they still have Keibert Ruiz kind of hanging out there as a major trade chip if they need to make a trade in the middle of the season.
Right, and their catching squad is already going to be pretty solid as far as having Austin Barnes and also having Will Smith. And still, we talk about that catching squad and even that lineup for the Dodgers, pretty stacked. They didn't really even have to make any moves for any position players, really. I mean, hitters 1 through 9 looking very solid, but I will have to say the Dodgers will absolutely miss Jock Peterson's playoff bat that he provided in October baseball. And of course, Kike. Everyone's going to miss Kike for being Kike, but at the same time, just adding that utility player that Kike was able to provide the energy inside of the dugout, and just it speaks for himself, really. Like everybody's missing those two guys.
Yeah, it's a different team for sure. That we've seen them lose guys over the years, but Kike and Jock have been around since 2015, and they've been part of the playoff heartbreaks. They've been a part of everything else. They've been inconsistent and consistent at different times, and they've definitely changed and been better in the postseason than they probably were in the regular season. And they might miss that come October. But it was a matter of those guys, going out and getting everyday jobs that they wanted, and the Dodgers didn't have room for them, or they handled things a little bit differently and didn't really have everyday jobs to give them. So, we wish them the best. Obviously, we're going to miss them. It sucks that they win, and then you kind of lose some of these guys that were a part of it. But the Dodgers will be fine. They have a lot of guys coming up. Zach McKinstry is a guy who can move all around the field and should be able to hit from the left side. Chris Taylor will, step up probably more in the Kike role and be filling in here and there. Second base is just going to depend if Gavin Lux steps up or not. So, might see Chris Taylor there. And then obviously Justin Turner is the big one right now that they haven't re-signed yet, but I just can't see him going anywhere else. I think it's just a matter of time rather than a matter of where he goes.
I have to agree too. I don't see Justin Turner signing with anybody else. I see him finishing up his career as a Dodger, and why not finish here at home? I mean, you're only 30, 45 minutes away from where you live to Dodger Stadium. He's originally from from Long Beach, attended Cal State Fullerton, was drafted by the Baltimore Orioles. And why not stay home, retire here at home, and be close to it? But of course, if it doesn't happen, if Turner does not come back, does the Chris Bryant sweepstakes still come to mind for the Dodgers?
Yeah, Chris Bryant's an interesting one based on what we've heard that the Cubs have asked for in terms of prospects from other teams. We've heard a couple catching prospects being named. The Dodgers, like I mentioned, have Keibert Ruiz, who's kind of in the middle. Will Smith's probably the catcher of the future. Austin Barnes is who the pitchers love, so he's going to stick around. They got Diego Cartaya kind of waiting in the wings in a couple years, and then they just signed another catcher in this most recent international signing period. So they got a lot of catchers, and Keibert might just, get squeezed out. So that's one guy they can go after. Matt Chapman from the A's. The A's are always looking to get a good deal if they can, and that's probably a little bit more far-fetched, but that's another guy out there. And Eugenio Suarez from the Reds. The Reds have been trying to trim money, but they probably don't want to trade with the Dodgers after the last time they traded with the Dodgers. So, yeah, I think if they don't get Justin Turner, I think Chris Bryant's the more viable option just because he only has 1 year left. It's going to be a little bit cheaper, not going to cost them too much. But, if they really wanted to, Edwin Rios can step up and get some ABs. Max Muncy's played third base in the past. Chris Taylor's played third base in the past. They'd have enough to be able to move guys around and make it work. But ideally, they just get Turner back and put him back in the middle of that lineup.
And this is a big bet, I would say, as well for the Dodgers. They need a guy like Justin Turner to come up big. He's a big contributor to that lineup. Even just in paper, when the team sees Turner there, it makes everybody else better. So just the fact to have that veteran presence, to have him in that lineup for the Dodgers, it just means a lot to them. And not to mention the playoff numbers that he produces as well. His stick is so important when the Dodgers make it to October baseball. But what are your final thoughts, Vincent, about this upcoming year? What are you thinking for the Dodgers?
NL West title, World Series appearance is the obvious goal. World Series win is the obvious goal. But it's a matter of how the Dodgers are going to play. We saw them after the 2017 World Series where, they should have won going back on it, but they played, some draining games. It felt like they, had played all the way through. In 2018, they kind of slogged their way through and had to go to game 163 with the Rockies and ended up making it back to the World Series, but they didn't make it easy on themselves. And then this year, I think it'll be a little bit different just because there was a short season and, so maybe the Dodgers are going to get tired of questioning the validity of the title because it was only a 60-game season. Like I said, the Padres adding to or maybe creating a rivalry in the NL West since the Giants haven't been good in a while. So I think they'll have enough promise and push to get through. I think they'll be the best team in baseball throughout the entire year and by the end of the season. And depending how everything goes with injuries and everything else, I expect them to be back in the World Series. And I don't see any team in the American League being really a challenge at this point that could match the Dodgers, on paper. So if they make it to the World, it's going to be a gauntlet to get through the NL. But if they get through the NL, then they'll be World Series champs again.
Of course, it's not going to be an easy task. We talked about it early on in the episode. A lot of teams brewing in the National League, some teams to look out for in the NL East, Phillies, Nationals, Mets, the Braves, almost the whole entire NL East. You look at the NL Central, you have the Cardinals, who are always a case that give the Dodgers some headaches. The Cubs, they're still in there. They're not going to, maybe not exactly that NL Central division winner or anything, but they always seem to linger around there. The Reds, a good team too in that mix. And of course, the Padres going to be a tough one for the Dodgers. But that's all the time we have left here on Sideline Sports Podcast. We thank you all so much for tuning into this one. If you guys enjoyed this episode, make sure to give a thumbs up to the episode. Also, hit the subscribe button down below. That's why we were able to get guests like Vincent to come onto the show. And all of your thumbs up and your subscriptions definitely do help out on the channel. And once again, thank you so much to my guest today, Vincent Samperio, the host of Locked On Dodgers and the creator of Chavez Ravine Fiend.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. Always down to talk Dodgers.
Absolutely. And we'll go ahead and make sure to put Vincent's social media handles down in the description below. So that way you guys can make sure to stay up to date with all of the projects that Vincent has going on. Once again, I'm Alex Naveca from Sideline Sports Podcast, signing off from this one. We'll see you guys next week. And of course, pitchers and catchers reporting this coming up week.